it's a little crazy. Is that screen frozen up, or we good?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay. So other than that, you know, it's tough. And on here in the States for regional promotions, and I'm sure probably, I don't know what the situation is there in Australia, but here in the States for regional promotions, you're only allowed to have a certain amount of people in the arena at a certain time. So it's really hard for regional promotions to do events off television. When you have television, and you know, that's mostly your larger entities, you know, like the UFC and Bellator that have those major television deals, you can afford to do a show off television, or can afford to do a show without an audience. Whereas on a regional level, the audience is where you get your money. That's where you make your money. So right now it's kind of hitting our industry pretty hard. But you know, fortunately the UFC has a major television deal, so people are still able to get to see mixed martial arts and MMA and still get to enjoy it, but the audience doesn't get to sit inside and see it.
Just to give context, you were, I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. So you were with the UFC for 15 years. You're basically the guy that ran everything out the back with them. You were,
yes, sir.
You know, you were the man at the UFC. That's how I initially met you, and always wanted to have a conversation with you. So can you tell us then how, because you went from working with the UFC and now you're running your own regional promotion. Can you speak about that gap and how that happened, just for context for the people that don't know?
Well, I actually transitioned from boxing to MMA. Before coming to MMA and the UFC, I was in boxing. I worked with Joe Frazier, and I worked with him for a number of years as his manager, as Smoking Joe Frazier with that left hook. Worked with him as his manager for a number of years, and then transitioned from him fighting to retirement to promoting his son. You know, Joe that was a fight family. You know, he had 3 sons and 1 daughter that all boxed and all were in the boxing game, and he wanted to promote them himself. So he started doing promotions, and you know, I was the guy that kind of had to put all that stuff together and create promotions and go out and get venues and get hotels. And that's when I started learning to become a coordinator in combat sports. So Joe was promoting his sons. He had Marvis Joe Jr., he had Rodney Frazier, he had Mark Frazier, he had his Anthony, he had Yank Durham, who was his primary trainer. Joe actually had his son, Chandler Durham, who was also boxing. So we did shows around the Philadelphia and started doing them on television. And that's when I started laying groundwork for Burt Watson to become a coordinator. And to transition, I did shows in Philly, internationally, and did a lot of time in Las Vegas. The MGM Grand, Mandalay.
How did that happen with you and Joe Frazier? How did you and he end up working together?
Oh man, how many days you got?
Man, I just want to know about it, man. That's the stuff I want to know.
Let me tell you something. It was my life has been full for chances. And that's why I tell everybody, you know, always accept the things in life that come before you, handle them as if they're going to go away quickly, because you never know when they're going to come back. I believe in a 1 and 1. You get 1 chance and 1 chance to mess it up. And I say that word nicely. So you gotta treat it because it's a chance. By chance, one day, I'm walking down the street in Manhattan where I worked. There was a car accident.
What work did you do? Just out of curiosity, what work did you do? I fucking always want to know this.
I was actually in the fashion industry. Okay. I went to school for fashion designing. I was not an artist, but I went to school for fashion designing on tailoring and how to make clothing. And that was the industry that I was in. I started with Burlington Industries, and I eventually got a job with Levi Strauss, the jean maker. And that's what I did. I was a salesman for them, as you can tell.
You got the gift of the gab for sure.
I was a salesman. So the office was in Manhattan, and I was commuting from Jersey, and then I moved to Manhattan. But my office was in Manhattan, and I would get off on 42nd Street. The office was on 56, so I would walk every morning from 42nd Street to 56. And I was walking up and down 42nd Street to 5th Avenue to walk over, and there was a car accident, and cars stopped in the middle of the street, and the cars couldn't get around because of the accident. So in that grid of traffic, there was a limo, and somebody jumped out that limo to see what was going on and what was happening, and that somebody was smoking Joe Frazier. And I'm standing maybe, I'd say maybe about 20 feet away or so, and I saw him, and I did a double take because, like everybody else,
smoking Joe.
I was a sports fan, and I got to meet him. We said hey, and we just kind of exchanged numbers, and I figured that was going to be the end of it. But I had his number, okay, which was the number to the gym.
But how? Because you might meet celebrities and whatnot. But how did you go from, hey man, I'm a fight fan, to smoking Joe Frazier? And if people don't know who Joe Frazier is one of the best heavyweight boxers of all time. Like anybody looking at this show that don't know who smoking Joe Frazier is, turn it off. Yeah, please, okay? Unsubscribe. Okay. I don't want it.
Okay, because I'm going to tell you something. And it did happen to us, and when I say us, because I was a part of it, but it was very seldom that you mentioned Muhammad Ali without mentioning Joe Frazier.
True that, 100%.
Those two names were always mentioned together because they had three of the best fights, heavyweight fights in the history of boxing. But to answer your question, that happened because that was the person that Joe Frazier was. He was a people person. He was not above the stars, because most celebrities and most people in entertainment and sports, it's very hard for the average person to go and touch, the average celebrity, depending on the person that he is, and then just the way the world is. But Joe Frazier was a plain old Joe. He was a down home street guy who acted like it, even though he was the heavyweight champion of the world, one of the biggest names and faces in sports. So being the person that he was, when I introduced myself to him and I put a hand out to say, hey, he put his hand out, and we just started talking. And he talked to me like he was somebody, like I was somebody he had known all his life, which I wasn't. And, he said, well, hey, listen, I got the gym in Philly, and I say, Philly, that's my hometown. I'm there all the time. My mom's still there, and yada, yada, yada. And his thing was, well, if you're ever in Philly, here's the number to the gym. Give me a shout. Just like that. Like I was another celebrity, okay? Or somebody that he was trying to set a fight up with. And he gave me the number, and I did just that. Kind of called him and communicated with him. And for a while there, when in transition, we kind of lost contact a little bit. Here's the kicker. So in the time of losing time, because time passes, this happened, I'd say maybe in 1979 or so. I don't want to give them kind of dates out because then I'll tell you how old I am. So going on, Joe retired in 1981. And I was in the transition of moving back from New York to Philadelphia. So I did. I moved back to Philadelphia. So around 1980, 2 or so, my niece got married in Philadelphia. And a friend of my mother's gave my niece as a present a limousine for her wedding. Ironically, the limousine company was owned by Smoking Joe. It was Joe Frazier's limousine company. That's what he did in Philadelphia. He owned the limo company in Philly and ran the gym. And in fact, ran the limo company out of the gym. So when she gave my niece the present as a limousine company, it was Joe's. And here's where the story gets even crazier. So the day of her wedding, Joe Frazier comes in his gym, and at the time we were using clipboards for, records, and you'd sign in and sign out, not the days of the computers. Then it was clipboard with a pencil on it. He came into the gym that day, he picked up the clipboard, and he looked at it, and he saw that the driver for my niece's wedding was not there. So you know what he did?
Nah, come on.
He jumped in the limo and drove it himself. The limo pulls up in front of my mom's house, and my nephew comes in and say, "Hey, Uncle Burt, the limo's outside, and he's waiting." And my niece wasn't ready, so I said, "Listen, you go tell him to park that limo. We'll be out there in a few minutes." And I said, "No, you know what? I'll go myself." And then he said, "You know what? That guy out there in that limo looked kind of familiar." So I said, "Okay." That's what my nephew said. So I went, and my nephew at the time might have been 10 or so, 11. I walked out to the limo, walked around to the driver's side. The guy rolled the window down, looked at me. It was Smoking Joe Frazier.
Just to give context, that's like Anthony Joshua driving his the limousine, like
right, or
Klitschko or
someone.
someone.
The fast food, and Anthony Joshua or Wilder or Fury or Tyson Fury drives up. That's what that was, and I'm like, whoa, and we just kind of reconnected. One thing led to another. What you doing in Philly? Yada, 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 yada. Stop by the gym. I went by the gym. And as the story went on, I went from visiting the gym to hanging out to the gym to hanging out with him. And we'd go out together. And every time we'd go out, he'd be pushing me in front of it. People would be mobbing him, and he'd be pushing me in front of it. And it got to a point where it got crazy because I was also still working as a salesman in the industry. I got to a point where I said to him, "You know what? You're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to leave me alone or hire me." He told me to quit my job. True story. So I did, and I went to work for Smoking Joe Frazier.
Were you with him now, because of the dates that you said then? Were you with him? So you weren't with him when he fought Ali?
That's when I met him in New York. That's what he was doing in New York. That was March 8th, 1971. I told you how time went by. I had time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I met him then. And it was not one of those things where we could have gotten together because he was so big, and that was such a big fight, and I was like a little spot in a glass of milk, with the mass of media, mass people around him. That was not a good time for us to get together. So we just kind of communicated. And I actually went to the fight, because back in those days, like today, you had fight parties, but you had legitimate fight parties. And that's how I saw that fight, on a fight party. And then afterwards, we talked once or twice and kind of talked and chatted a little bit. But he was always traveling one way, and I was always traveling another way. But we kept communicating. And I'd say about 1979 or so, we stopped. It kind of lost a little until about 2 or 3 years later, when I'm in Philly and trying to get a limo for my niece's wedding, and we met back up.
One of the things, like when I speak to people, but it's a hard thing to say, and I don't want to make you blushy, but one of the things, like when I've been around people, one of the people that people go, "Would you like to speak to whatever fighter or whatever?" honestly, one of the people that I've always wanted to talk to the most has been you, because one, I admire, I get a lot of inspiration from what you've done, like, and I also, because you are at least over 30, I don't know your whole age, but you must be over 30, and I've always thought,
I'm 40 years over that, baby.
and I've always thought, man, this guy will have the best stories, like the best stories and the best life lessons, like I've always wanted to be able to have a proper conversation with you, but it was always in passing. You always obviously directing the whole thing out the back, and I was looking after my fighters and that at the time. So man, so then how did you end up at the with the UFC?
Well, I did fights, and I tell the story almost in my sleep. During my course of working with Joe and coordinating fights, I got to meet everybody. I got to work with everybody. I got to see and do things that I never thought would happen in my life. I got to work with Don King. I got to work with Lou Duva. For those of you who've not been in boxing, those are some of the biggest promoters that ever put on shows in boxing. And I ultimately, by working around those guys and Frank Warren, who most of you in Europe know who Frank Warren is, getting to work around these guys, I got to meet a lot of people. From I'll throw a year out there, from 1984 to 1997. The only major name in boxing I never worked with was Lennox Lewis. That's everybody. That's Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones, Roberto Duran, Hector Camacho, Julio Cesar Chavez, Zab Judah, you name them. I've worked. The only person I've never worked with was Lennox Lewis. So I did De La Hoya and Oscar.
Sorry, you just cut out there, but you just cut out.
Am I in?
You're in.
You can see my mug too?
Yeah, man.
Okay. It was one of those things where I did shows all over the United States and mainly in Vegas, because all the big fights started working in Vegas, and I was doing everything in Vegas. I actually did Tyson's last 5 fights as a coordinator, worked on his last 5. I was doing a show in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand, and the guy who's promoting the fight said to me, "Hey man, there's a guy out here in Vegas that's getting ready to start this organization, and he's looking for good people, and I suggested to him that he talks to you." So I'm in the middle of the fight, the weigh-in, and after that I said, you know what, whoever the guy is, before I leave here to go back to Philly, I'd meet him. So he said to me, I'll set up a meeting at the end of the day, which was the end of the weigh-in, and we can sit and we can talk. At the end of the day, at the end of the weigh-in, I'm in his office, he brings this guy in, and the guy was Dana White.
That's crazy, eh?
And so, and I just said to him and the guy, listen, man, whatever happens to me, or whatever the situation is, as long as you pay me and respect me, you got me. Plain and simple. And that was for anybody and everybody. And at the time, Dana White was Dana White. Can you see that?
The thing, you've frozen, but you've frozen again. Your screen is frozen.
How about now?
Still frozen. Now we're good.
Okay. All right. So, but I said Dana White was Dana White, not Dana White.
I remember him back in the day, like when he was like skinny and yeah.
Yeah, but he his name was that big.
Yeah,
his name
yeah.
is now that big. You can't. That's how big his name is. It's off the screen. But you know what? He was cordial, and that was the conversation we had. The fact that I was recommended to him from the person that I was recommended, he figured, that I probably half-assed knew what I was doing, so he was going to give me the shot to do that. So he did. And he said, listen, man, I got this thing coming up and I'm trying to put it together and, but I need good people. So again, pay me and respect me, you got it.
Did you think that the UFC would blow up the way it did?
Well, no, I didn't know, because my job was coordinating for anybody that hired me, anybody that brought me on. I went on and did their show because I learned to love to do it. And I've always liked doing it. I mean, it's what I do. So when he brought me on and we started, the first show I did with them was UFC 30. And that was in Atlantic City. I met him in 1999. And I think the first show was 2000 or maybe 2001. I'm a little foggy with the dates, but that was, I met him in October and he called me around December and said, listen, man, I got a show in February. I had nothing else. So I was like, shit, I'm good to go. So February, he had the first show in Atlantic City, which for me was a breeze because I live in Philly. So it was a drive. And first show was UFC 30. By UFC 40, 41, I could see that it had legs. I could see the way it was being run, the people he was bringing around. The one thing that Dana White never did to me was try to tell me how to do my job. Never. In fact, nobody's ever really tried to tell me how to do it, but always gave me the job to do. And I had to make the best of it. But I always wanted to make sure that person wanted me to come back. So that meant me doing a good job, But I got to see and work with the biggest promoters in the world. I did Frank Warren's fight with Tyson and Lou Savarese in Glasgow, Scotland. I did a show in Sydney. I don't remember the exact date, but I did shows for Frank Warren. But I could see just by the way that Dana was hiring people, the way he was putting things on, the tenacity he was using. And it was at a time where here in the States, combat sports was not sanctioned by every state. So we could only go certain places. And the first place that we were allowed to was the state of New Jersey. So the Athletic Commission allowed it to happen. And that was one of the roadblocks we had in the growth of the UFC and mixed martial arts and combat sports was the different states, the athletic department accepting it and allowing it to happen. But he was tenacious. He just kept going. He kept going. He kept pushing. And I can see from that, because I know the only way you don't lose a job is if you do the job and you keep digging in that hole. You keep digging. You keep digging. And I could see that he was. So at that point, I could see that the UFC was getting legs. And places we were told that they didn't want us in, he didn't stop, and they kept trying, and we finally got in. And it finally started moving around from state to state to state. And we went from, I think the first year, we did maybe 5 shows. Then it bumped up to 10 shows. Then it bumped up to 15 shows. When I left, and it's been almost 5 years now, we were up to about 37 shows for that year.
It's incredible, eh?
It was, but during the course of the growth and the development, we improved on the production part of it, the production level, the television level. Everything evolved at the same time. You can do right now. I see you sitting in your studio. The lights look right, and I see your little George TV in the back, I'm sure you set all that up. You got that white wall and the little pink is beaming off the white wall. everything has to be set up, you know, and when your show gets bigger, you know, you shouldn't have to move to a bigger studio because your show got bigger. You should be able to handle the size of your growth with what you have. And that's what had happened. You know, it started growing and it started growing and it started getting bigger and it started getting more popular. And one of the things that was one of the keys to the success of it was that, and as I said, I came from boxing at a high level. You know, when I worked with guys like Mike Tyson and De La Hoya and Roy Jones and Mike getting ready to fight again.
Who you got in that?
Jeez,
Who you got?
I'm getting old. You know what? Whoever takes the first punch, that's the end of it.
Do you reckon Roy has the pop still today to stop Tyson coming forward? He can.
I think he does. I mean, Roy has been boxing. I think Roy's last fight was maybe a year ago, year and a half or so. So it's not as if he hasn't been in the ring now for 5 or 10 years. I don't think Tyson has been in competition for about that long.
Yeah.
It's been a while, you know, and you know, we keep, I won't say we keep forgetting because I can't question somebody's knowledge, but I'll say let us not forget that Roy Jones went from middleweight, super middleweight to heavyweight champion of the world. He beat, I think it was John Ruiz.
Yeah, Ruiz.
Heavyweight.
I remember that. I remember that.
Legitimately. So he knows how to do that. He knows how to carry the weight, you know, and his even at a smaller guy, he was always good at keeping guys off of him. And it's not as if he's in there with a guy that's 20 years younger than he is, you know. He's got a guy that you know is the same age. And one of Tyson had a problem with guys that ran from him and could keep him off. Tyson, he overwhelmed his people. You know, he just when the bell rang, he overwhelmed them. And that with the power that he had, you know, once a guy got hit, you know, Larry Holmes kept him off for a little bit, you know, and couldn't do it. Evander Holyfield fought the same type of fight that he did. So it was kind of even there. I don't know whatever kept Evander Holyfield up aside from him just having a good chin, but he did. But I think that Roy Jones will be able to keep Tyson off of him. They're using 12-ounce gloves, and they're only going to fight 8 rounds. So I think both of them are bringing the same stool into the ring, if I could say. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of situation.
Did they say that the rounds are going to be shorter too? 2-minute rounds? Did you hear that?
Oh, I didn't hear that. I just heard that they're using 12-ounce gloves and that they're only fighting 8 rounds. Which you know, it'll be interesting. You know, I don't remember if Roy Jones had a chin or not. I don't remember that because he rarely got hit.
I was about to say,
You know?
I haven't really seen Roy take a lot on the chin in his peak. Like he was
right because he rarely got hit. He knew how to dance around and control the ring and to keep people off of them. And what I was saying to you was that right now we're talking about Roy Jones and Mike Tyson. You know, back in the day when I worked with those guys when they were at their peak, professional boxing, you know, if you saw a guy like Mike Tyson or Roy Jones or Bernard Hopkins or Oscar De La Hoya out someplace, you couldn't get near them for security. And that was just the way it was. You couldn't touch them. You know, if a guy like Tyson or Holyfield or somebody was walking down the street or whatever, You know, as a fan, as the average fan, rarely could you ever touch them or get close to them. You know, there were times that I did fights, you know, for HBO or Showtime, you know, as the coordinator, and I'm always the guy behind the scenes. So very few people got to see me. But there were times when I was out front. If a guy didn't know me, I didn't get to the fighters, you know, and I had to identify myself. The point I'm trying to make, you had asked me about the success of the UFC and MMA. The difference was that when Chuck Liddell or Anderson Silva or Randy Couture or George St. Pierre came for fight week, if there was a fan standing next to him, that fan could reach out and touch him and shake his hand. Or that fan could get a photo or get an autograph. You know, Dana never kept the fighters away from the fans, which I think was probably one of the best things he ever did, because it gave the fan an opportunity to touch a superstar, you know, and they started that way, and it was always that way. You know, one of the hardest things was keeping them fans away from the fighters, because we ingratiated them and we let the fighters go, you know, and the fans, anytime they saw me, they would follow me, because they knew at the end of my journey, there was going to be a fighter. There was going to be somebody there wherever I was going. Sometimes I'd just be going to the elevator, and I'd walk past and I'd look to the left, and I could see them in the back, you know, group of heads following behind me, because they figured I was going to see somebody, you know. But
I want to ask you, I was like, you know, in the 90s and that, I was, say, from 13 to 18, you know, 98, I was 18. Through that period, Tyson was fucking huge, like huge. Can you,
yes, sir.
you were in and around that, you worked 5 Tyson fights that you said. Can
Yes,
you
sir.
tell us the magnitude of the biggest Tyson fight versus the biggest UFC fights that you've worked? Because you've worked the biggest of the biggest UFC fights.
Yes.
Can you tell us the magnitude, the essence of those type of fights in comparison?
Well, at that level, when you have all of the ambiance around it, you know, it starts with, you know, the fighters' arrivals. It's always grand, and a lot of media and a lot of people around. Very few fans, you know. In boxing, very few fans. In MMA, it was always a lot of fans, but there was always a lot of energy, and always a lot of people, and always a lot of media around, and that made for a lot of chaos, you know. And I think I think the first fight I did with Mike was actually here in Philadelphia, when he fought Buster Mathis Jr. at the what is now the Wells Fargo, which probably held about 10 or 15,000 people. Then I did Tyson in Glasgow in a sport arena, and it rained like hell, but it was still, people were out there jammed, and I actually walked Mike from the dressing room to the ring. They had him under 2 umbrellas, and we had to put black bags around his feet so he wouldn't walk in the mud and the water to get to the ring, because the ring was under a canopy. But the electricity was unbelievable. The fans were unbelievable. It was, when you're actually involved in it and you're trying to control that, you don't realize the magnitude of it until you're actually sitting in an arena and you're sitting back and you're watching and you're looking at it, you know, because you're running back and forth all night. I think comparison to that, the biggest event I ever did with UFC was, we did a fight with George St. Pierre, and I'm brain farting because I don't remember exactly who he fought, but it was at the Rogers Arena in Canada, and it had 55,000 people in there, and that was crazy. That was unbelievable.
I'm just looking it up now. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so huge that to get from one dressing room to another, I had to I used a golf cart to get me around from one end of the arena to the other end because it was so huge and it was so massive.
Was that the Jake Shields fight?
And was it at the Rogers Arena?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that was it then.
Okay.
That was it. It was huge. I did a fight in London with Michael Bisping. It was his first fight in his hometown. And the dressing rooms were under the stands, and the stands were made of steel, kind of like a thin tin steel. So you could hear the fans thumping on the ground, and it echoed down the hall, man. It gave me chills. I knew what it would probably do to the fighters, but you know, I always managed to get in the fighter's head and his eyes between the dressing room and the cage or the boxing ring.
Did you? What about the big McGregor events and that? Did you work with? Did you work them as well?
Yes.
You were still with the UFC at the time. How did they compare to those big shows?
McGregor was starting to get steam. He was starting to steam up and get the reputation that he did. But you know, I mean, I went through George St. Pierre, I went through Anderson Silva, I went through UFC 100, I went through Brock Lesnar, you know, and comparatively, they all were on the same level. They were huge. They were huge fights. The crowd was unbelievable. When we started doing our weigh-ins in the arena for fans, you know, and started putting guys on center stage, man, that and bigger and bigger, and more fans started coming in, and it was huge. I left in 2015 or so. McGregor, by that time, I think he had his third fight or fourth fight. You know, he was still on the undercard, but he was on his way because he had more mouth than anybody else. You know, he was always animated. What you see of him now, he has grown and has grown into that person. But, you know, it's like when college coaches get athletes, they know the ones that are going to go to the pros. They can tell right away the skill levels. This one's going to go, you know, and I could tell from the beginning that he was going to go, because very few guys in MMA or UFC was talking smack. Very few of them. You know, it wasn't conducive. It didn't seem like it was conducive to MMA initially, because there weren't a lot of smack talkers. They were not really animated. I mean, you had guys like the Diaz brothers who were just straight up street guys.
Yeah,
and that worked.
They weren't even talking smack though. They were just being themselves.
No, right, just being themselves. Like I said, they were straight up street guys, and I can say that because I'm a hood rat, you know. But you had guys like George St. Pierre that was low key, and still the amount of fans and the raise that they got was unbelievable. Anderson Silva was quiet and low key, spoke English when he wanted to, but he was huge, you know. So it was very. Now you're frozen. There you go. It was very few guys that was talking smack, and you know, not everybody knows how to talk smack. You know, it's you don't learn how to talk smack. It's about as natural as you don't learn how to fight. You got something in you that needs to be trained and honed and skilled, you know, and it was there, you know, and he honed it and skilled it. And quite frankly, the UFC never put a lid on any of its fighters. We had rules. You know, I think the biggest ass was me, okay? If anybody put SmackDown on them or put rules on them, was myself. And somebody had to do it because, you know, these were professional athletes. They were professional fighters. And if there weren't rules and regulations, you know, they'd be all over the place, you know, and they'd be all over the place quickly. So
can you elaborate on that? Can you elaborate on what that means? Like, so the UFC didn't have like a code of conduct for the fighters. You were the one that put those things in place. And can you speak to what those things were?
Well, no, I didn't say they didn't have a code of conduct. There was a code of conduct, but I said they didn't put restrictions on a guy. Like they didn't tell a guy you couldn't say this at a press conference, or they didn't tell a guy you couldn't bring, you know, your family with you to an event, or you couldn't travel with these many people, or things like that, you know, or this person wasn't allowed in or something like. They never did that. They kind of let the fighters be themselves. You know, whatever his personal thoughts were, they never said, you can't express that here. You know, if a guy would come in during the course of the week wearing his cultural garb or whatever it was, whatever he brought to the table, that's what they let him be himself until it was time to step into that cage. Then he had to become a fighter. So they never, you know, had any kind of those restrictions on the guys. Myself, the restrictions, you know, I had, you know, like I believed in making weight, being on time. Those two things to me I was adamant about that. And it was tough. I mean, guys came in the week of the fight needing to lose 15 pounds. Now, I'm a guy that came from boxing. I've seen them call off boxing events because a guy was 4 pounds over or 5 pounds over. I had never, before MMA, I had never seen a guy lose 12 pounds in a week or come in needing to lose 15 pounds. But it was very common, and everybody kept saying to me, oh, they're wrestlers. You'll get to know that. You'll get to understand that. And I could never understand it. So I said, you know what? I can't understand it. So I'm going to put it in here that I'm not happy with that. So, and working with the guys, I let them know, you know, I'd get the bout sheet on who was fighting, and I'd call them. Yo, what's up, baby? Just so you know, I'm going to be there when you get there on Tuesday. How you looking? They knew that meant how that weight was looking. Oh, right now, Mr. Burt, I'm at, you know, like he was fighting 170. Right now, I'm at like about 88, 89. Say, all right, you got some work to do. Don't be messing around with me when you come on site, okay? You know, I'd have that kind of conversation. And pretty soon the word got out on that. Guys would show up and, you know, I'd check their weights. I always made sure that I had certified scales for them to check their weights, to make sure that it was right on and solid. And, you know, I just had to get in their heads that you got to make weight. You got to be on time, you know, and I'm going to do everything in my power to respect you. And I'm never going to let anybody else disrespect you. But I'm not going to let you disrespect me either. I can mess with you, but they can't mess with you. That's the kind of situation that I tried to create and put in their head, that, you know, whatever I did or said to them, I meant it from here. And I always said to fighters, you know, I've had conversations with guys that I had to do this on myself. You know, I'm like, whoa, but I had to listen because that's kind of the way I created the situation to them and for them, was that, I mean, I worked with you before. I don't know how close, but I always worked with them close enough to have them get a comfort level to feel that whatever they brought, they could put in my head.
The only thing with I think not even a run-in. I never had a run-in with you, but because I was always with Rob, and he cut a fair bit of weight, and I think one of the first times that we dealt with each other as well, because I think he'd gone up to middleweight, and people don't really realize how big he is. Like they think he's a small middleweight. Right. And I remember,
I realized.
Yeah, but I remember him stepping on the scales, like because we got there early. We always got there early because we had to travel. And you were like, man, is this guy going to be all right with his weight? And I remember you took me aside and go, no, is he going to be all right? And I was like, no, he's 100% he's going to be all right, because he's a big boy, you know what I mean? And a lot of people don't think that until they see him. And he had a fair bit of weight, but he actually makes it pretty easily, the weight. But
you were probably one of the nicest, because most guys are not that nice when they come at me like that,
Oh, are people rude to you? Are people rude to you in general?
Not rude to a point of disrespect. I've been disrespected once, and maybe I won't tell you who it was, but once I was disrespected by a guy, and I went to Joe Silva and Dana and told him I was done with that guy, and that guy had one fight there. So, but no, they would never. I mean, but see, they knew, so they would say, "We told you, don't worry about it. We tell you not to worry about it." And I would say to them, "You telling me not to worry about it is about as much as you talking to my what.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it. Because honestly, boss, I didn't know. I came from a boxing background, so I didn't know wrestlers cut that kind of weight, knew how to cut weight, and they knew how. I just knew that the fight was a week away, and this guy was 12 or 13 pounds over. And I can tell you, I've seen as much as 21 pounds. Now, I'm not gonna mention no names, but I've seen them that heavy in a week.
Yeah, man. And it would be, the thing is, at the end of the day, of course you're going to be worried, because if people start missing weight, it reflects on you. You know what I mean? They're going, oh, what did you tell me? So.
Yeah. Oh, let me tell you something. I think in the first person that missed weight on me was Travis Lutter.
Fuck, against Anderson.
Yes. First person. And he was like maybe 5 pounds, 4 or 5 pounds. And I said, never, ever, ever again. Okay. Will I let that happen to me? But I didn't let it happen to me. He ran out of gas, man. He just couldn't go anymore. And I had a scale and weighed in, and I ran with him, but he just couldn't go anymore.
He looked like he was going to die before that.
Oh, well, he passed out. He actually sat down because he came right from the steam room downstairs, and he sat down in the back. And when he sat down, he just kind of slumped over, man. But you're probably the first person that's hearing that, because I never said that to anybody, But the worst thing in the world was, because that on that stage, at that scale, it was always me, Dana, and the commission. So Dana never looked at me, really, unless somebody wasn't on weight. And the first person he looked at was me. Never know what that stare was, because, and then when it was holding the towel, it was me and him. And he'd look down at the weight and he'd look up at me, and with that Travis Lutter, I said, you know what? He will never look at me like that again. So I clamped down harder on the guys. I would check their weight, and I would check their weight, when they came in during the course of the week, I'd call them on the phone. Meet me down the room, baby. I'm going to check that weight. Or I'd show up in the workout room and I would check the weight. Always. I was always on them. I could tell you that in my 14 years or 15 years that I worked, I think maybe I had maybe 3, 4 people that missed weight. I was on it, bro. I was on it.
Oh, you definitely were. I have to say, you definitely were. But see, I never took it. Nor did any of the guys from our group. Like, we never took it. Who's another guy that I knew as well that always spoke? James Tahuna. Do you remember? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. That was about him and his brothers.
Yeah. They're good guys,
yeah,
And we'd always like the same thing. Like he'd spoke about you, but it was never a thing. I never took it. Like, I always took it as you were doing your job. Like, I never thought.
Right.
And if anything, I was like, fuck, at least somebody's checking the weights, because some like exactly what you said, and I'm not going to name them. I'd watch people cut weight and think, dude, you got to fight. You look like you're going to fucking die. You don't look like you should even get in the cage. Don't even worry about that. Like, and so I say that to say this: did you at any stage, say during the Travis Lutter weight cut, was there ever a point in you that you started to get like scared, like thinking like, hold on a second, what's going on here? What if this guy dies on here? Because you can die cutting weight. People have died cutting weight.
Oh yeah.
Was there a moment where you got like scared?
For Travis Lutter, not really, because I knew that he was trying, and I knew that he was doing the right things during the course of the week. Sometimes I see guys come in, when they get off the plane and they come to me, the first thing I did was put you guys on the scale. Before you even filled out paperwork or even went into the office, I took you and your luggage to a room and checked the weights. So I always did that. And sometimes the guy, when I'd see him on I got there on a Sunday, fighters came in on Tuesday. I'd see him on a Tuesday, the fight was Saturday. So I see him on Wednesday. I'd go past the whatever the restaurant is. He's sitting there eating the meal. So I'd walk in the restaurant and give him the little side eye. I know damn well you're not sitting here wolfing that stuff down. And I saw that weight. So I would check during the course of the week. So I was always, I'd go step by step. And every time I looked up, Travis was either on the treadmill, in the sauna, or working out. So I knew that he was trying. So, but if I saw a guy, not like I saw him on Monday and saw him Tuesday eating a cheeseburger and some French fries, and then Friday morning he hustling his ass off to cut weight, because I had, now, if you watch the weigh-ins are now earlier. They do that early weight cut. I started that early, because every weigh-in day, they were on the scale by 3:00 in the afternoon. Every weigh-in day from 8:00 to 11, I had the scale available to check everybody's weight. If somebody wanted me down there 7:00 in the morning, I was down there 7:00 in the morning to check their weight, because I knew the guys were struggling. The guys were tough. Chuck Liddell came in one day, and it was fight day, and he ran into me about 8:30 in the morning. When I say ran into me, I'm in the arena with the scale, and I do their gloves, and I put them on the scale. I check their gloves, make sure their gloves are fit. I roll their gloves up, put them in a bag, write their names on them, put them away for the next day. He came down with the towel around his neck and the warm-up suit and the gloves, and he was sweating. And he came down to see me about 8:30, 8:45. And he, at that time, I think was about 6, 7 pounds to go. Maybe about 6. And he left me running around the top of the arena. And this was at the MGM, where you could run up and down the step. He ran from the time he left me to the time he got on that scale at 230.
Whoa.
And when he got on that, and I saw him, because during the course of the day, I'm in and out of that room. My scale's in there, and I got security. If I had to pay for extra security to watch that scale so nobody touched it, I did that. Because once I locked it down, it was locked down, baby. But then back then, earlier, we had the meat scale that had the weights.
Yeah.
So I take them weights off and take them to my room, so they couldn't touch the scale. But I knew he ran until it was time for the weigh-in. And when he came in that room, he was running. He was still running. He stopped. He stepped on that scale, got up there and wiped himself off. And we had to hold the towel, but he made weight. But I've seen that. I finally, I never got used to it. I never stopped fussing about it or bringing it up, because weight cut is hard and dangerous. And these guys cut a lot of weight. The average guy could not cut 10 pounds in a week or 15. I told you the most I ever saw was 20, 21. I lied. 25 was the biggest I've ever seen anybody. That's a lot of weight. And I've seen that done.
How heavy was the guy that cut 25 in a week?
Oh, he had to fight at 205. So you take it from there.
Yeah.
He had to fight at 205. Now, I know you're probably trying to go through your Rolodex.
No, it's not. That's not why I say it, because like, say for example, 25 pounds is a lot for anyone, but for a 205er, it's one thing. But you got like flyweights that are cutting 15 pounds, and that's more compared to their body weight.
Oh yeah.
That's why I was saying it.
A guy at 205 can walk around at 230.
Yeah.
Walks around at 230, maybe 235 or something like that. And eventually, when he gets closer to a fight, he starts cutting down. But then you got a guy that fights at 155 or fights even at 170. When they're not fighting.
Sorry, you cut out a second then.
And that's a tough weight cut.
Am
I in?
Yeah, you're in. You're in.
I should be good to go.
Yeah.
But at 155, from 135 to 155, it's hard for those guys to cut 10 pounds in the course of a week. That's a lot. 10 or 12 pounds, that's a lot. When you get to 170 and up, those guys walk around a lot heavier anyway. And it seems like they cut weight easier. I'm going to mention one name to you. I'll mention two names to you. Gleason Tabal and Dennis Seaver. Those guys used to cut in one day. In one day, it was nothing to cut 8-9 pounds. I'd see them in the morning and I would say, phew. But then they would leave me and go right to the sauna and right to the workout room and not leave until it was time to come to see me again at the weigh-in. And those were probably about the only two guys that I would see with that kind of weight and not worry, because I got used to them as time went on.
But Gleason looked like
other guys.
Gleason looked like a middleweight. You know what I mean? When he was at lightweight, like if you just saw him walking around, he looked like a middleweight. He was huge.
Yeah, he did. And so for him, I don't. Well, I won't say easy, because I know some of the things they did to cut that weight, which wasn't an easy thing to do. But in one day, him and Dennis Seaver, they were masters at it. They were masters at cutting that weight and how they did it. But that's kind of how they trained to do that. And I actually saw Dennis cut his weight, saw how he cut his weight. And when I say saw, you know, he'd come see me at 9. I'd have that scale from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11, you know, and I would find him about 11:30, 12 o'clock. And he'd be in that room with his trainer in the sauna. That sauna would be jammed, would be crowded. And I always went in there because I knew that my guys were going to be in that sauna and were going to take it over. So I would go to the hotel and I would tell them, you know, that listen, you know, Friday morning or tomorrow morning, my guys are going to be in there. And, you know, if you can, you know, I'm letting you know now so it doesn't become a problem. So they were prepared. But I used to do that when we would check into a hotel. I would be the first one on site every fight. Wherever we went, I was always the first one on site. If we had a fight on Saturday, I got there the Sunday before. And I would start my groundwork and start finding out where the grocery stores are and start finding out where the hospital is and start mapping out how we would get back and forth to the hospital. I personally did that because I never wanted to have anything that would obstruct us from getting from the arena to the hospital if we had to, and if we had to do it quickly. And I did that drill through traffic and found ways without traffic and made sure the van was parked at a certain place and, you know, the ambulance was parked at a certain place and the grocery store was a certain place and, you know, the just things that they needed. I did the groundwork. So when I did all that groundwork and I would do the run to every one of those places. So I knew the time it would take with or without traffic. And that's for every little detail, you know, grocery store, pharmacy run, sauna, anything that they needed, I had it set up and had it timed out. The last thing I would do once I had all that situated and set up was I would go to the hotel and I would talk to them and they would talk to me because I had the master listing for the rooms and had the rooms all set up. And I saw where every guy was. I also made sure that the rooms were right. Okay. I didn't have Jake Shields and George St. Pierre room next to each other. Okay. And so I went through the rooming list. They gave me a room. I asked them for a rooming list before everybody checked in. They gave it to me and they showed me where everybody was. And I just made sure, you know, and after I had that meeting with them, I would tell them that call me before you call the cops. And they would sit back and look at me and wonder what I meant. Okay. I meant just what I said. Call me before you call the cops. If you got a problem in this hotel with anybody or any of my guys, please call me first. Because a lot of you know, people they didn't understand fighters or didn't understand how they cut weight or what they were doing and found a lot of things. And if they didn't understand, the first thing they did was security. Yeah. Or the cops. Yeah. And I told them, before you call the cops or before you call security, call me. And here's my cell number. Or I'd be in my room. And for the most part, they did that. I always got the first phone call.
But I want to ask you something, and it's pertinent to what you just said then. I'm curious, because I want to get into a bit of your mindset and a bit into how that mind of yours works, you know? So you've dealt with...
Good luck.
Yeah, I've dealt with a lot of... I see that you've dealt with a lot of, like, big egos, big, you know, conflicting egos, even if they're not conflicting with you, but they're conflicting with each other and with other people.
Right.
How do you balance that? Like, what's your mindset going into that? How do you balance that when you've had situations where you've clashed or where people are clashing, even if they're not with you? How have you dealt with that? Not necessarily how did you avoid it or how magnificent you are. I'm more curious as to how, you know, when things go bad, because we can all do it when it goes well. I want to know when it goes bad.
Well, the first thing I tried to do, boss, is to make sure that everybody around me had a comfort level with me. that anybody around me had a comfort level that I was going to take care of them and I was going to look out for them. And that if I told them something or told them to do something or directed them to something or someplace, it was right and it was spot on, and that they never had to worry about it, and that they would never have to come back to me and tell me I was wrong about something. That was tough to do. And that was the toughest part of my job, was to kind of making sure I was right first. And once I got that comfort level, and I did that just as we are doing now.
Right.
You know, I talked to them eye to eye, and I got that level. And I got to a point where anybody that I worked with, and I gave them that comfort level, if they didn't see it anyplace else, they told other people about it. So when people came to me, they kind of knew how I was going to handle things. So when I got that comfort level, and with the grace of God and my faith and the hard work I put in, I got that comfort level with everybody, just about everybody. So with that comfort level, they all listened. And I think I let them know how old I was first. Okay, I'm not your brother. I'm not your buddy. I'm your dad. Okay, so let's start with that. All right, that's the level that we're on. So I'm gonna keep the respect level there, and you give it back to me the same way. And that's the way. I didn't say it that way. Some guys I said it like that, but I wanted to make them feel that, so that they talk to me and they listen to me. There are some people that you hear, but you don't listen.
Yeah.
I wanted them to hear me and listen to me and get a comfort level that when I said something to them, it was going to be spot on. I'm not going to tell them, you got a scale in that room that's 100% accurate, and that room is at 72 degrees. I knew how hot that room had to be for these guys. I didn't want them to go in that room and the scale wasn't working and it was cold. And they come back to me and like, Burt. I go to my room, the mats are not down, the room's dirty, the scale's not right, the temperature's not right. That's not gonna happen. So I kind of, give them that comfort level. There was, and I wanted everybody around them to get that comfort level. Like I said to you, I told them, I can mess with you, but I'm not gonna let them mess with you. I had a situation where the fighters wanted to bring some water or something else they had at a weigh-in, and the state commission came to them and said, you can't do that. So I politely asked him if I could talk to him a minute. And I pulled him to a side and I talked to him and I told him, listen, I'm gonna have to take the bullet for that, because I already told these guys that they can't. If you can work with me, I'll control it as much as I can, but I've already told them that this was okay. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but he also felt comfortable enough with me to say, okay, but going forward. So I squashed that, and the guys were comfortable to continue what they were doing. But I also knew that it wasn't anything that was a detriment to them making weight, a detriment to them, fight night. Like, for example, I didn't want them drinking coffee fight night, or having coffee or soda in the dressing room. Now that may sound, well, not to you, because you're a trainer, you know what it is. It was just certain things that I knew that I would tell the guys in a talk, when I sit and talk to them before the fight, that, I laid out my rules for the dressing rooms, for the workout rooms, for how many people you have in the dressing room, on the ring walk, this you can do, this you can't do, what time you got to be in the dressing room, what you can bring in the dressing room, no food. Just certain things like that I laid out from the beginning, so that when it came time to do it, it wasn't the first time they heard it. I wanted to make sure that whatever they heard, it wasn't a surprise to them, because Fighters and trainers that's a whole different breed of people, man. If you don't give it right and they lose 1 inch of confidence in what you say or what you can do, you're done.
You know what the thing is as well, because it's such a high pressure situation that everybody's looking as well. If things go bad, how can I, not everyone's like this, but a lot of people are like this. How can I already start laying the groundwork to blame someone other than me? Do you know what I mean? Like who else can I blame? I want to blame Burt. That's the guy to blame. The UFC, so it's exactly that as well with the trainers that way, and the fighters as well. You hear fighters after a fight, when they lose, it's because I was injured or whatever. But when they win, they don't care if the other guy was injured.
No. But you also had to make sure that those things, and I had a mental checklist in my head. And, every time a fighter or somebody came in to me, I had a conversation with them and I talked to them and I listened. Nothing anybody said was irrelevant. I don't care what they said. I listened to everything and I digested everything, down to at a point of assigning workout rooms. I had to get to know what trainer didn't like this trainer or what fighter that trained in that gym and doesn't want to go in that workout room because he just left that gym. I had to know that. So I had those kind of conversations to get that and to hear that. And I made it very public what I was intending on do because I put signs up. And right away, a guy see it, and I had a guy once to say, "Oh man, I see the name on that." He saw a name up there. Is this my workout room? So yeah, he said, "Nah." And I asked him why, and he told me. That was the last time that happened. From that point on, it was a listen, and it's the same thing. I learned it, I learned how to do it because it was also very important, especially fight night in the dressing room. Can you imagine putting two guys in the dressing room that don't like each other, or who's going to fight that guy, or who just fought that guy and lost? So I had to figure it out because not very often did I have dressing rooms big enough to put red corner, blue corner. I always had to dissect it. So I had to know, boss, what I was doing, and I did that by listening. I listened to everybody. I looked at everybody. I figured it out during the course of the week. Some things I had to flip around the day before, but by the time it came to dressing room, I never had to switch the dressing room around, ever. Never had to switch the dressing room.
Because you already knew by the time we got there.
Oh yeah. By that time, I got there, and things I'm saying now, I've figured it out after having done that so long and doing it so often, and now I'm sitting back and I'm seeing things. I'm seeing how things are going. I know the last fight they had four people that didn't make weight, or 5. I would have died. Well, first of all, I don't think I would have ever had that many people not make weight. But
I tell you, I can tell you this: like, it was different after you left. Like, I'm not gonna shit on the guy that, the guys that had to, because in fairness to them, you had very big shoes to fill because you had a long time and you got it perfect, and it's probably not even that guy's fault. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure it wasn't him that said, "Let's get rid of Burt." You know what I mean? But it wasn't the same.
I kept control. I kept control of it, and quite frankly, right now, I think during the course of my years, I think I brought on maybe between the United States and Asia and the UK, I think I brought on a total of 30 guys on all those states to work with me. And I think now today, there might be 15 of them still there that are still working, or so that are still working. So a lot of what went on, I kept control of, and I gave the guys that worked with me what I needed to help me balance things out, and to balance control of it. Because, it's also one of them things. I've seen fighters where a commission person go up to them and say, hey, I want you to do this. And they give them that look like, what the hell are you talking about? They use a different word, but the look they gave them was like, yeah, you out of your mind, or how dare you talk to me like that? But you know what? That's just something that I, as time went by, I first of all learned to respect the fighters and the trainers and what they did. And I showed them that I respected that, immensely. But to give that back to me is just to kind of make my life easy. That if we got a process and a system, let's just go through it, because I'm gonna get you here and I'm gonna get you out of here. And I'm gonna get you out of here, maybe a little better, because you're gonna leave here with a little bit of money in your pocket. But I'm gonna get you from there to there, but I need you to work with me. And they did, man. I can honestly tell you that when I came into MMA, the guys that I met and the people that I've worked with, man, it wasn't easy, but I was on it. But they made it easy because they listened. They respected me, and I sit back now I do a podcast now. I'm advertising my own self.
Please advertise as much as you possibly can.
I do a podcast called Legends to Legend.
Yeah, I'm aware of it, 100%.
And I sit with guys who are no longer. One guy who's still doing it, but I sit with guys and I talk to them, and I have it's an OG chatter. I sit and it's not an interview. We have a conversation about the old times and the old days and what we went through and how we went through it. And I sit and ask them questions, and I let them ask me questions. Whatever it is, baby, there's nothing off limits. And I sit and I talk with these guys, man, and I learn so much now, even, with these guys, and I do that show on MMA Junkie. And I just did one with Randy Couture. And I actually had the shows that I've done. I did Chael Sonnen first, and I did Randy Couture. I had conversation with these guys that I'm not a host. I don't do what you do. And I know how to stay on the fence. But the conversation that I have with these guys, man, it's legitimately a conversation of things that I've been through with them, things that I know. Having a conversation with Randy Couture. In my lifetime, I've had the privilege and the grace of God to bless me with having been around long enough to work with Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. And I also worked with Muhammad Ali's daughter and Joe Frazier's daughter.
Yeah.
I worked with Layla Ali and I worked with Jackie, Joe's daughter, and I did the fight between them two. How blessed is that, man?
That's
did the
insane.
Fight and moving on to Randy, because I worked with Randy's son.
Ryan.
And yeah. So to work with Randy and his son and to sit and have a conversation with him about the times that we worked and the stuff that I laid down, and he was telling me the one thing he told his son was, when Burt tells you something, you need to listen. Okay. And it was, it was kind of surreal to have that conversation, because that's the third time in my career that I had ever done that with. I almost did it with Sugar Ray. Sugar Ray had a son, Sugar Ray Leonard, but his son ended up not fighting. I worked with Hector Camacho, Macho Time, and his son, and his son is now fighting. But I didn't work with them at the same time because the son was a little too young. But, I do that show and Legends to Legends. And, I talk to the guys and, I'm working on right now the second segment of it. And it's fun, man. It's really good to sit and talk to these guys that I've actually worked with, and I can have a conversation of something that I know.
And you have such a wealth of knowledge and so many stories. It's just, I'm really enjoying it. I just want to ask a few questions to you, because you've been very generous with your time. And what's your greatest failure / setback? But not necessarily am I saying it from like, it has to, like, it probably was a negative at the time, but what's your favorite setback? Like when you look back and you go, I'm glad that I went through that horrible time. And what was the renaissance that came from that?
Well, there was a period when I didn't really know what I wanted to do, because as I told you, I was in the fashion industry. I was headed for the runway. Okay. And the transition from fashion to combat sports, that's, and so I was kind of in a position where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I left New York, and from New York to Philadelphia. And at the time I had kids, so I had to make up my mind and make adjustments. And, that was a time that I kind of second guessed myself, and was wondering why I made certain decisions. But, as I went along, I learned how kids grow up and they follow you. And my kids are now grown, and I got grandchildren. And I got five grandchildren.
So awesome.
My oldest grandson just graduated from Yale.
Whoa.
And also played football there, and I got the second one that's on her way there. And so it turned out all right. I'm going to say something to you I probably haven't said to anybody else. My departure from the UFC was by choice. Somebody at a high level said the wrong thing to me. They questioned my integrity. They questioned my work ethics. And they caught me at a bad time, But then I wasn't, I'm not a guy that takes any crap anyway, especially when it comes to my job performance and what I'm doing. And I am a control freak, kind of, but you have to be in control of things. And, he came at me and I went back at him. And I do regret that I did that. I could have handled that a little better. I could have, maybe cooler heads could have prevailed, but it didn't. And that was probably, I think that's one thing that maybe I didn't handle probably the way I should have. But, when you're in there, baby, and you're getting hit, you're like, oh no, oh hell no.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. He was throwing them and I was ducking them, but a couple of them got thrown, like, oh no, hell no, baby.
But once it's on, and this is the other thing, once it's on, it's on. Like you can control yourself and the rest of it, and then in hindsight, and I'm sure there is, but but once there's two things, man, that I was going to say, like, because one, your job requires you to be a control freak. Because if you're not, it's like my accountant. My accountant is ridiculous, like a control freak. Nothing, and I think, like, but that's who I want as my accountant. I don't want a guy that goes,
yeah.
mate, should be good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, by the way,
don't worry about it.
yeah, you're gonna do 3 years in jail.
Let's just move this over here a little bit and just hope it stays up there.
Yeah, no, it's not. And then once you're under that pressure cooker and it kicks off, it kicks off. We can all act better, but I've seen the way you act, and I've dealt with you for quite a number of years, even though like it wasn't thing, and like it was a tough job, man, and there wasn't a lot of room for error. So it's
none.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah,
there was no room for errors, because you guys the guys were so used to that. They were so used to me handling things that way, and it worked and it flowed, and it didn't work until they got in it, and they saw it, and they could come to me, they didn't have to go to somebody else, or they didn't have to go to 10 other people to get one answer. I never wanted that. If you wanted 10 things to do, you needed one place to go to, one person, one voice, right here. And
what did you learn? So you said that interaction and that, but where did the renaissance from those regrets, that bad thing, where did that go? Like, so when that happened with the UFC, what was the mindset? Because everyone looks at you, and this is one of the things, like, well, at least for me, like I've followed your career kind of thing, and I'm like, when that happened, you look at it and I'm like, the ball's on this guy. He just left the UFC. Oh, he went and started, and now he's gone and started a new company and a podcast. And I sit there and I think, like, why am I such a bitch, me, right? But then I sometimes think, like, but what was the actual mindset? Because I'm sure that now we're talking on an intelligent level. I'm sure Burt wasn't without fear. I'm sure Burt wasn't like, I'm good, I just quit the UFC. Can you talk us through that mindset and what were the thoughts that were going on in your mind?
Well, no, you're always, especially when you do things off the cuff. When you do things off the cuff, and then you have time to sit and digest it, and it resonates. And then you have an oh shit moment. You're like, what? And you have that, but you know what? I also know, as a coordinator and a person that puts things together, knowing that you put them together, they got to stay together. It has to stay, and it has to work. And initially you think about it, but then you say, you know what? I got to reinvent it. I got to keep going. I got to make this work, and I got to make it happen. Initially, when I think right afterwards, I think I spent maybe about 4 months not doing anything, which was maddening for me. Not doing anything for 4 months. It's as bad as it is right now. Right now it's, but I understand it, because right now we're all in a situation where my last fight was March 7th, to the exact date, March 7th, I had a fight. And March 10th, the world shut down, or the United States shut down. And so it was, so it hasn't happened since then. But before that, right after I left the UFC, for about 4 months, I did nothing. I had to digest it and think what was going to be next. And, the phone rang. And it was someone on there that was having a fight and wanted to know if I'd be interested in possibly helping them out a little bit. And it took me 2 seconds to think about it. And it was, heck yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And I got that one, and then another one called, and people knew I was out there, but didn't know where my head was, or my availability, or, I even had a guy that said to me, I didn't think of calling you because I know damn well I couldn't pay you, which wasn't true. Okay. If you had a job and, I was still looking to stay active because I learned that, man, that 4 months was the longest time in my life that I'd ever been without doing something since I got out of high school in my life, and I realized it, because I got out of high school and I went to college. I got out of high school in June. I was in college in August in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, which for me is like coming to Sydney. It's way over the other side, and I went from college to the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps doing Vietnam, and I got out of the Marine Corps, went right to New York, and from New York into Philadelphia and running into Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman and running into Dana White. So I was never, ever without working or without doing something. And it was February of 2015. And February 26th, as a matter of fact. So for the next 4 or 5 months, I wasn't doing nothing. And I had never, not since high school, had I ever been like that. So that was a shake up. And you know what? I'm not a young man. So it was like, whoa, I'm at a stage in life where people talk about retiring. I'm not even thinking about that, bro. I got about another good 10 years right now to do whatever.
What's crazy is when people look at you, see all the stuff you said, and I'm just saying for me, it just doesn't seem it. It just seems like you have it all figured out. Do you get what I mean? I think it's such an important thing for not just young people, for anyone to see that, like, man, nah, everyone goes through that stuff, and you question yourself, you second guess yourself, you have sleepless nights. I'm sure you have. But when I'm looking at you, it's like, nah, Burt's got it. Like even when you left, I was like, the ball's on this guy. How? Who does that? And I was thinking, yeah, but you know what? He does that because he's Burt Watson, and I'm sure he's got it all figured out. I'm sure there's 30 organizations waiting for him. And there you were having sleepless nights.
No, you never have it figured out. Remember I said to you, boss, you have a 1 in 1. You have one chance and one chance to figure it out. That's my life's motto. And I don't care how old you are or how young you are. You got one chance and one chance to F it up. And you know what that F word is.
Yes, sir.
But you figure it out, and you got to realize that, and you got to know it. And if you don't know that, then you know how to give up. And that means you didn't know you had a 1 in 1.
Yeah.
You didn't figure you had no chance. But yes, oh yeah, it's I've worked with guys at the highest level and at the beginner's level, and you see it all, and you see people struggle through it, and you hear it, and and you struggle through it yourself. That 4 months that I did absolutely nothing was mind blowing, because I'd never done that before, and it's like, whoa, and the phone rang, and I enjoy working with people who are just starting out, and people who are eager to learn, because I like to give what I got. When you're at the highest level, everybody up there feels they've got as much as you got.
Right.
So nobody's listening, everybody's expecting you. It's nothing but expectations at that highest level. And the highest expectations.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you have to live up to it, and at that level, are you kidding me? I mean, the UFC is the biggest company in the world. And we had the best fighters in the world, you know, and everybody's eyes and all the television and everything was on it. You know, I had one article that came out in Japan where they took my head and put it on Bruce Willis's body. Okay, in one of his movies, Babysitter or something he did, or something movie he did, you know, and just that quick moment, I'm like, damn, you know, that's what people think, or that's how people react and do things, you know. So you have to keep in your head, you know, there's a 1 and 1, and you got to keep going, man. And it happens to everybody, man. Trust me, on some level, regardless, it happens.
But I just want to thank you so much, man. You've been so generous with your time. Where can people find you? Where can, like, what are you doing? So what are the things now, because we're now wrapping it up. Now, let us know everything about you. Where can they follow you? What can they do?
Hey, man, I am big on social media. You know, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Burt Watson for real. The number 4, you just pop in Burt Watson. I just started a YouTube channel on YouTube. Go to Burt Watson Promotions and look under, you got to click on the videos, and you got videos of my interviews. I've got some chatter videos. I got some videos where I explain how to roll gloves. You know, I talk to you about rolling gloves and, you know, just different things that I've experienced in a lot of the interviews, but that's in Burt Watson Promotions on the YouTube channel. I've got a podcast now I'm doing on MMA Junkie called Legends to Legends, that I sit down and I talk with people like Randy Couture and Chael Sonnen and George St. Pierre. And, you know, I get to sit with them, and you get to see what they're doing now and some of the things that we've been through. And we talk some OG chatter, some of the little fun things that we've been through and we've done, you know. So I'm very active on social media, and anytime, all you got to do is put it out there. And if I'm on social media and I see it, as you know,
yes,
I'll
sir.
answer you.
100%. He did that. I have to say is the truth. You know, I send out a lot of texts and that to people to see, you know, I want to get people, interesting people on the podcast. And I actually was one of the people, I was like, man, I don't want to message Burt because he probably won't message me back. And I've had like bigger names than you, but I was actually, you know what I mean? Like I really wanted to get the story, you know what I mean? And then it took me a while, and then I said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And yeah, he did hit me back. So that's 100% true, man. That is, man. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. You hit me up on Burt Watson, and I will hit you back. And I love chatting with everybody on Instagram going. And when you go to my YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, baby.
Yes, sir. Like and subscribe to Burt's channel, guys. And to this one too, please. So thank you very much, Burt. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you, man, and having an opportunity to put myself out there in Australia, you know, and to kind of talk to you and your fans. It's nothing but a pleasure to me, baby. You know, trust me.
Thank you, sir.
This is what we do and why we do it, baby, all night long.
Thank you, sir.
Ooh.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man.